Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another film review. And we are back with part 2 of Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, this second part of Crisis follows a very different sort of interpretation. It doesn't necessarily stray too far away from the original material, but it definitely gives us a different point of view. We start off with essentially Batman arguing with a bunch of his children. Well, sort of. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Essentially, our Batman from the first part, we learn, doesn't take Dick Grayson, Barb, or any of them on as the Robin or Batgirl. That just doesn't happen in his version of events. However, on other Earths, we find ourselves in a situation in which essentially our heroine does decide to take on all these other individuals and form the Bat family. Now, this Batman we know is constantly throughout this whole part arguing with the Bat family and trying to come to some kind of terms of what's going on. We then shift completely with the plot and find ourselves following Kara Zor-El and her importance in this whole entire story. We learn that Kara was picked up in this version of reality by the Monitor by accident. She had just survived the cataclysm that destroyed her world of Krypton, and rather than going to Earth and meeting her cousin, in the events of Crisis we find her in this kind of inner turmoil of where she becomes adopted by the Monitor, essentially. After the Monitor adopts her because she was apparently, in his view, he finds himself in a situation in which he is conflicted in his own feelings for her. First of all, he finds himself unsure whether or not he should just eject her out of the airlock, or whether he should actually give her the chance to live. He decides to give her the chance to live and realises that due to her trauma of the death of her own home planet, she finds herself basically denying everything that's happened to her, and so it's very hard to get her to eat. The robot who works for the Monitor essentially points out that the best way for Kara to adapt to her scenario and her situation is to have someone eat in front of her, and that should hopefully make her more comfortable. After this is achieved, the Monitor decides to bring Kara up for a number of years, not quite sure how many, but essentially after a while, when Kara learns the truth of the death of Krypton and the fact that she can never go back, the Monitor tries to argue that he tried to stop her from the suffering. He only lied to her to make her feel better, not to hurt her. But Kara doesn't take it this way and decides to go in her ship and essentially go off to Earth. She tries to change the course of history by becoming a hero. She achieves this, but the Monitor's not too pleased, and on top of that, she can't seem to find Clark. After a while, she learns it's because there is a giant crisis going on, and the Monitor needs to use Kara as a kind of stepping bridge to allow her to help bring all the superheroes together for this giant crisis. Meanwhile, we also get given another separate story of Dr. Spector. Dr. Spector. Or Spectre. Please correct me in the comments. But essentially, we're introduced to this very psychotic and very messed up man who, when he was younger, fair enough, he was bullied and picked on by other individuals. But when he realised what his superpower was, he took advantage of it and took advantage of them. He made people pull themselves down in front of teachers. He made them torture their classmates and murder them. And essentially, after a while, he became the king of his own kingdom by essentially ruling over the school and then getting as far as the government itself after breaking into Atlantis and manipulating the feelings and thoughts of others. After he achieves this, going from universe to universe, he finds himself conflicted about whether he can continue doing what he wants, especially due to there's only one emotion he could never control. And that emotion was love and happiness. He could always twist the anger inside of people. That's why he managed to manipulate the Nazis. But it never really ended. And after a while, he just got so fed up and bored with everything that's going on. Kara then picks him up because the Monitor claims that he is one of, if not the most important individuals to be part of this giant team-up. However, after the Spectre manages to manipulate his way around a lot of people, he finds himself being lifted out of reality for a split second by the Anti-Monitor. The Anti-Monitor tries to convince him to convince other people that the Monitor has been manipulating them the whole time and that he is essentially the bad guy. But it turns out that, as we learn later in the story, that's more far from the truth. Yes, Kara didn't like her adoptive stepfather, but he actually didn't mean to affect everyone's lives. He was just someone who had observed all of reality for a long time and decided enough was enough, especially after the wave of temporal energy got so bad. But Spectre doesn't care about this and essentially uses Kara as his own puppet to kill the Monitor. Meanwhile, everywhere else, what people don't realise is going on, what's just happened, everyone is trying to go and forge together on Earth 1 to fight against the giant shadow demons. Now, hopping back a little bit, all of the individuals that the superheroes at this point in time have been dropped on multiple planets because all of a sudden these creatures have come out of the dark and are trying to attack the towers. Now, they're not the only individuals who have attacked the towers throughout Crisis. The Joker tried to attempt to attack one of the towers back on his Earth, however, he was stopped by the Bat family. Also, one of Grodd's gorillas ends up on another Earth with someone who was chased by them for years, and the two have to come to a compromise when the shadows begin to grow larger and larger and get closer and closer. Grodd's sergeant gets killed halfway through the battle and asks the scared hero to essentially promise that he will guard the station with his life. So, Justice League, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Part 2. Would I say it's as strong as Part 1? In bits, but I also feel like this story really sways more than Part 1. We find ourselves constantly questioning who we're supposed to be focusing on in this story. Kara's story is really compelling. The trauma, the torture, and most importantly, the way that once we catch up to the events of the first film, that Kara finds herself facing shadows of all those who have died and that people have forgotten. But Kara doesn't forget. I also feel really bad for Kara in this story due to the fact that she finds herself constantly being asked by people to do stuff, meanwhile sidelining what's actually going on in her own head. All the trauma she's going through isn't getting enough time to grieve, and that is the tragedy in this story. Whereas Dr. Spector finds himself in a situation in which he's just kind of lying back half the time. I mean, he's given power by the Monitor, but after a while, he abuses that power so much that I feel like he's about to hit his own karma. So what would I give Part 2 out of 10? Honestly, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Purely for the reason, as I said before, the fact that it's nice to get the backstory on Dr. Spector, it's nice to get the backstory on Kara. But I feel like the fact that Dr. Spector feels like he's interrupting too much of Kara's story really bugs me, and that's why I give it an 8 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye, stay beautiful, you beautiful people.